The Salem Witch Trials are one of the most infamous episodes in American history, embedded into our cultural consciousness by Arthur Miller's critique of McCarthyism in 1953 with the play The Crucible, and by the fact that it is the deadliest witch hunt in American history. But what really happened in Salem in 1693? Scholars have pointed to the unique social conditions that may have led to this unique power struggle, but before we get into that, let's go over the events as they happened. The problems in Salem began in January 1692, when Elizabeth Parris, daughter of Reverend Parris, and his niece Abigail Williams, who were 9 and 11 at the time, started having what have been described as fits, which included throwing objects, making strange noises, and contorting their bodies in odd ways. A local village doctor, William Griggs, was called to the scene, and proclaimed that the only explanation was that the devil was in Salem, and that these children had been bewitched. Later, an 11-year-old girl named Ann Putnam started exhibiting similar conditions. This led to local magistrates Jonathan Corwin and John Hawthorne to investigate the matter. On February 29, 1692, they interrogated the girls, who said that the Parris' Caribbean slave, Tituba, a homeless person named Sarah Good, and a poor old woman named Sarah Osborne were to blame, and that they were witches working for the devil. The next day, the women were put on trial. The two Sarahs maintained their innocence, but Tituba did not. She said that the devil came to her and bid me serve him. She described visitations from black dogs, strange colored birds, and a black man who wanted to sign his book. She reported signing it and that she knew of other witches in the area looking to destroy the Puritans. All three were later thrown in jail. These initial accusations caused an uproar in town and sparked one of the worst moral panics in American history. Soon after, accusations came in from all over Essex County, which included Salem Village and Danvers, which is now known as the town of Salem. One such person to be accused early on was Martha Corey, who was an upstanding citizen in the town and a member of the church. As opposed to the three original women who were accused, who were peripheral members of the society, Martha being accused of witchcraft was troublesome, because that meant that anybody could be accused. Sarah Good's 4-year-old daughter was taken in for questioning, and found guilty after a confession was pried out of her. This was an early indication of how bad the witch hunt was about to get. A girl who could hardly think for herself was put on trial, mainly because of her connection to another of the accused. This meant that having a connection to somebody was grounds for accusation, further stoking the flames of suspicion. Soon, the matter of Salem became relevant on the state level. Deputy Governor Thomas Danforth came to the hearings, which now included dozens of accused. Not long after that, on May 27, 1692, Massachusetts Governor William Phips ordered what was called a special court. During these hearings, a woman named Bridget Bishop, who was known for her promiscuity, was put on trial. She declared her innocence, saying, "I am as innocent as the child unborn." However, she was found guilty and became the first alleged witch killed in Salem by being hanged on June 10th at Gallows Hill. 5 days after her hanging, a man named Minister Cotton Mather asked for spectral evidence to be disallowed in the hearings. Spectral evidence includes evidence such as dreams and visions, which were permissible in court at the time, but they don't have any legal value today. Once again, this even-keeled approach was ignored, for the time being at least, and 18 more alleged witches were hanged between July and September of 1692. By now, the witch hunt had gone on for 9 months, and had absolutely consumed the town. But in October, the tides began to turn, as Increase Mather, father of Cotton and president of Harvard, denounced the use of spectral evidence, declaring that it was, quote, "better that 10 suspected witches should escape than one innocent person be condemned." Finally, somebody of high enough social standing was accused, as Governor Phipps's own wife was questioned. The trials had gone far enough, and the special court of Oyer and Terminer was dissolved on October 29, 1692. However, this did not mark a definitive end to the trials, as the special court was replaced by a superior court of judicature, which did not allow spectral evidence and condemned 3 of 56 accused. But this was still 3 too many. By May of 1693, Governor Phipps pardoned all the accused still alive. But by this time, 19 people had been hanged, a 71-year-old man was pressed to death, and several people died in jail. In all, nearly 200 people had been accused of witchcraft. By 1697, the colony began to take responsibility for the tragedy that had occurred in Essex County, as the General Court ordered a day of fasting and soul-searching. In 1702, the trials were declared unlawful and restitution payments were given in 1711, but it wasn't until 1957 that the state of Massachusetts apologized for the atrocities committed. The Salem Witch Trials occupy a unique space in American history, and naturally have been given quite a bit of attention by scholars. Let's take a look at some of the theories as to what may have led to the events in the first place. Some people have looked at physical explanations for the symptoms of the original girls, theorizing that ergot, a fungus present in rye, may have been the culprit. The psychedelic LSD is synthesized from ergot, and ingesting the fungus could cause similar experiences such as muscle spasms, vomiting, hallucinations, and delusions. While that theory is interesting, it only accounts for a small percentage of the accused. I think it is better to look at the cultural backdrop of late 17th century Essex County. A few years before the Salem Witch Trials, there was a war called King William's War, fought between the English and the French in American colonies. The damage it caused in upstate New York and parts of Canada sent refugees into Salem and created a strain on the resources available. The culture of New England at the time was Puritanism, which was a strict and inflexible version of Christianity. The Puritans and what they perceived as manifestations of the devil, specifically witches, were immersed in a power struggle that gave way to the Salem Witch Trials. Puritanism was created in England in the 17th century towards the tail end of the witch frenzy in Europe that lasted from roughly the mid-16th century to the late 17th century. The obsession with witchcraft had a religious element in it from the beginning. When Pope John XXII declared in the 14th century that heresy is an action and not just an intellectual crime. Later, a connection was made between witchcraft and heresy, officially making it a diabolical crime. Then in 1486, Dominicans, or Catholic clergymen, Heinrich Kramer and Jacob Sprenger wrote the Malleus Malphacarm, or also known as the Witch's Hammer, which is the single text that led to the witch frenzy. The texts detail how witches do in fact exist, and that they do malicious and diabolical magic, and thus are agents of Satan, and that they need to be found and prosecuted. Another text that popularized the notion that witches and Satan are in league together was Demonology, written by King James I of England and published in 1603. This text held that witches had orgies in the woods, had sex with demons, and ate babies. After its publication, the witch frenzy in England reached a high period for nearly 40 years. While these new Puritans in New England were in the land of America, the beliefs inherited from texts such as the Malleus Malphacarm and Demonology were clearly present. This meant that the Puritans saw Salem, indeed their entire environment, as a space where the war between Satan and God was playing out. To achieve purity and to secure power, the witches must be expunged, wherever and whoever they might be. What happened in Salem was a moral panic, and scholars have noted that these arise as a result of the quest for social power and the struggle of who gets to govern and police. The witches operate as folk devils, or scapegoats that represent something else. In this case, they are symbols of Satan's presence. But they are even more than that. The women accused who lived at the periphery threatened the social order that the Puritans sought to establish, and as such were natural or unnatural choices for the Puritans to try and scapegoat. So what happened in Salem was not something supernatural per se, but something sociological. Arthur Miller was astute to observe that the Red Scare of the 1950s was another moral panic that mirrored what had taken place in Salem 250 years ago. Salem will always hold a deep significance in American history, and we do well not to forget what happened there. As always, I'm Jack Daly. See you next time.